A man stands at his father's funeral. He shakes 40 hands. He thanks people he's never met for coming. He doesn't cry once. By the end of the day, 3 separate people tell him how strong he's being. Not one of them asks if he's slept in the last 3 days. That moment holds the first of 7 truths about middle-aged men that almost nobody says out loud. Not because people are cruel, because saying them means admitting something uncomfortable about a system we all quietly built together. Quick pause. This video took hours of research and more than one late night to get right. If it's landing, don't skip subscribing to Labyrinth Psychology. It takes you a second, it took us a lot more. The man at that funeral wasn't necessarily fine. He was simply performing the one version of grief culture has approved for him. Quiet, functional, dry-eyed. And because that performance looks identical to actual strength from the outside, nobody around him ever has a reason to look closer. But if strength and suppression look exactly the same to everyone watching, how would anyone ever know the difference before it's too late? Sadness, fear, humiliation, disappointment? For a lot of middle-aged men, none of these ever get to show up as themselves. They get rerouted through the one emotional channel that's always been considered acceptable. Anger. A man who seems irritable over something small is rarely actually angry about that thing. He's expressing 5 other emotions through the only door culture ever left unlocked for him. Which raises an obvious question. If anger is the only feeling allowed a clean exit, what happens to a man who doesn't even get angry anymore? Take a man named Doug, the guy at every family gathering who fixes the leaking faucet, jump-starts the car, calms the room down when an argument breaks out. Doug has been the reliable one for so long that nobody in his family has checked on him emotionally in over a decade. Not out of neglect, out of habit. Reliability quietly erases the question of whether the reliable person is doing okay. Somewhere in their 50s, a lot of these men become the most capable version of themselves they've ever been. Sharper judgment, faster pattern recognition, decades of hard-earned instinct. And that's often exactly when a company starts looking for a reason to let them go. Experience becomes a line item labeled cost instead of what it actually is. So if the most skilled version of a man is also the most disposable version in the eyes of the system he served, what does that system actually value? Here's the one almost nobody says out loud. Somewhere in their late 40s and 50s, a lot of men go through real, measurable hormonal shifts. Testosterone decline, energy changes, sleep disruption, a body that simply doesn't respond the way it used to. Women's equivalent transition gets a name, research funding, and increasingly, open conversation. The male version barely has a name most people would recognize. So these men experience a genuine physical loss of stamina, of a version of themselves they used to take for granted, with almost no cultural permission to grieve it, and often not even the vocabulary to describe what's happening to them. That's the part that makes people the most uncomfortable to hear, because it means the silence isn't a personal failing. It was built structurally, on purpose, by leaving something out. After years of being the fixer, the provider, the calm one, it takes an enormous amount for a man like this to actually say the words, "I'm struggling." And when he finally does, the response is often confusion, deflection, or a joke meant to diffuse the tension. Not because the people around him don't care, but because nobody ever built a script for what comes next. The culture spent decades teaching him to stay silent, and spent 0 time teaching everyone else what to do once he stopped. This is the truth, sitting underneath all the others. For most of these men, attention, respect, even love arrived tied to output. The paycheck, the fixed sink, the steady presence everyone could lean on. Once the providing slows down, through retirement, illness, or simply age, the attention often quietly slows down with it. Not because anyone stopped caring on purpose, because no one ever built a version of his worth that didn't run through usefulness. None of this is about blaming any one person, or claiming every middle-aged man carries all 7 of these at once. It's about naming a pattern that got built slowly over decades by a culture that rewarded exactly the behavior it now quietly punishes them for. That man at his father's funeral wasn't actually stronger than everyone else in the room. He was just following the seventh truth without ever being told its name, performing usefulness and composure because that's the only version of himself anyone ever taught him was allowed to be seen. Maybe the most uncomfortable truth of all isn't on this list. It's that the people closest to these men could ask one different question today, and it would cost them nothing at all. If any of these 7 hit closer to home than you expected, say which one in the comments. And if Labyrinth psychology is where you want more of this, subscribing takes a second and helps more than you'd think.